Hello, my name is Socrates, and the concepts presented may offend you.
The introduction of any prohibition is always a matter of compromise. Alcohol creates disruption, but state-produced alcohol induces alcohol epidemics. To introduce labor to state development is liable to be better managed, but if not properly managed can become a form of economic slavery. This is on the prohibition of weapons, such as knives and firearms, and the principles behind the mechanics that determine the loss of such to the weight of loss to the state's strength when the observations are made on social constructs that are not only older than mankind but are literally founded on the evolution of our species. What is a man without a knife? A laborer. What is a man with a knife but a safe laborer? What is a man with a gun but a provider of safety while he labors? Now to hold considerations to a few nations. There is America, the land of opportunity, the home of the 1911. There is Canada, the Great White North and once the home of the lumberjack. Then there is China, the home of imperialism, the saviors of Stalinism. Now to begin, this not as much blind statements on what I believe is the best use of the regulations on the safety of others determined by the capacity to be engaged or the reasoning for what the weapons use is, but my perception of the effects on guns, knives and the regulation on their uses each nation has developed themselves and the reason for such regulation to where the use is not only often secondary but irrelevant. Switchblades, maces, gravity knives, brass knuckles, firearm, assault weapon, shuriken, the list goes on and is comprehensively moved in their nature as their prohibition is only as effective as the nature of their user. If the concern over the use of maces/flails was that if to defend oneself, the user would be incapable of a likely effective follow-up strike, if the time it took to draw a knife was the rationale over the prohibition, would it not be the kitchen knife that should be banned, used in most domestic violence cases historically, in street fights and home defense scenarios, if the fact the weapon use is too fast a projectile to effectively defend a home? Then would not these reasons be the consideration for the prohibitions? If not to uphold the betterment of the state by providing safety through restriction, should not behavior be one of them? That through the exhibition of gang mentality gatherings, through CCTV identifying those sexually deviant to the both statute and common law, that if we are to protect our both civic liberty and the integrity of our homes and cities, then should not the effective use of knives be interpreted as a means to an end, and, if so, the comprehension of simple statistics on who had what during what cases the weapons were retrieved, and thus, the ability to use these, sparingly from the risk of their use, either that their effectiveness were to be noted as overpowered, or that the consequence of their use was the retrieval by those whom the citizen were powered to defend against. As if not notable the misconception that we were designed through evolution as war animals that became civilized, but as well that the use of weapons in society has not only given the battlefield an edge, but that statistics on crime are only relevant to the consideration of their use as common as to the rule that would dictate their use without the same liability to their need. If so, their life vastly exempts them from risks that a majority of humans have to face. Insurance costs, home security, life insurance, home insurance, cost of living, quality of life, one side of those affected would more likely carry knives. Though not to exclude that it is a matter of civic responsibility to uphold the laws of the state as a citizen as to retain the use of police funding, resources, financial aid and the tax refund in their coming. So in the rough consideration of the shortcomings of making a model of knife illegal, the reason a knife exists is spared from the citizen's understanding of their conscious right to freedom, the law and the breach of both in the act of one committing an offense against them. Now, on to firearms. The average bullet fired moves at 1,750 FPS and their use is anywhere from law enforcement to the offenses against them directly, excelled in combat, but these ruling less often applying such as military law is a spirit of cyber excluding sexual offenses. If there were psychological exams, then would not this be a matter determining the capacity to own and purchase them? That does not exist, if the use of the weapons was predetermined to the space the weapon was designated for. Then the consequence of Larry the marksman shooting a home invader penetrating the wall and hitting neighbor or bystander. As well, the persons in possession may be on the registry for such, But if their use specifically excludes the cases where the design of the weapon is considered an offense, then is not state best notably ruling against the safety of the citizen and the public for exclusion of the cultural adaptation. Criminals, the primary factor in this statement, do not care about the regulation of either melee or ranged weapons, and thus would use illegally acquired pieces for their use and collections, than to consider the instigation of the citizen to have to face risks of retaliation for self-defense using not only less than the equivalent to these weapons, but to have their allowance to use these weapons often scrutinized with the public moral perception that the Christian mentality of turn the other cheek should be reflected by the law. Many of the pinnacles of modern states bias to outdated religious morality, and that the conlusive effect of ethics professors in society is not fully equitable to their literary capacity when engaged by the state, as during the Nuremberg trials, with specifically this exclusion in proceedings of the law.
Thanks for listening. Click the like or subscribe buttons to support this channel.